Hi everyone, how are you going? My name is Lisa Blair and I'm an Australian explorer, adventurer and climate activist. Behind me here you can see my boat Climate Action Now. So I've sailed this boat so far into 8 world records across different oceans around our world. The most notable one was probably my solo circumnavigation around Antarctica that I've done twice now. So the first attempt I left in 2017 and unfortunately suffered a dismasting at sea. So that's where the mast itself snapped in half in a really bad storm in the middle of the Southern Ocean. I then went back in 2022, only this time I was increasing the sustainability across the vessel. And I spent 92 days surviving on board this vessel in the middle of the Southern Ocean completely alone. And I set a new world record, becoming the fastest person in the world to sail solo, non-stop and unassisted around Antarctica. I also became the first woman in the world to ever do it and the third person in history, which, it's pretty cool, right? But what's even more interesting is the amount of sustainability and education awareness. Now for me, I became passionate about Climate Action Now when I was first sailing across the oceans and I saw just so much pollution and plastic in the water. I was 20 days from land in the middle of the Southern Ocean and a styrofoam box just floated past us out there. We also sailed from Australia up towards China and across the North Pacific, and there were areas of the water where there was so much plastic pollution that we had to physically put a person on the bow of the boat with a boat hook to push and shove the rubbish out of the way of the boat so that we could sail through. To me, that is terrifying and heartbreaking. And at the time, I felt so overwhelmed by it that I didn't know what I could do to make an impact. So I decided to launch the campaign Climate Action Now. And you'll see my vessel is actually called Climate Action Now. So what I do is I go out to community members like yourselves and I ask you to fill in a post-it note message. Each post-it note is an environmental action on something that you're already doing towards a better future. So Sally has short showers, Joe turns the lights off when he leaves the room, Bob, he picks up 3 pieces of rubbish every time he walks his dog on the beach. And the goal of the campaign is to show people that as an everyday Aussie, everyday human, we can create an impact. And if all of us are doing one small action every single day, then together we will have that lasting impact of change. Now, because I was campaigning, and I've been campaigning this Climate Action Now message for the past 8 years, I've also been learning so much more about our environment and about the health and the risks of our oceans. So by the time I went to do that second campaign around Antarctica, I decided that I would partner up with a number of different scientific research groups around the world, and I'd retrofit the sail locker on board Climate Action Now into a micro lab at sea. So partnering with the Australian Institute of Marine Science, the Bureau of Meteorology, IMOS, a whole bunch of different organisations, I was able to collect really valuable research data from the middle of the Southern Ocean. So we sampled for microplastics the whole way around Antarctica. And out of that, I was able to collect 180 different microplastic samples every single day of the trip. And out of that, we found plastic in every single sample, the whole way around the pristine waters of Antarctica. Now, if you're thinking of what is microplastics, microplastics is a plastic particle that is smaller than 5 millimeters in size. And what often happens is you have something called secondary plastic in our oceans. So if we have something like a bottle cap here, a bottle cap will be floating around in the ocean, it'll be exposed to the sun, and it'll start breaking down and deteriorating, and it'll become smaller and smaller pieces of plastic until it becomes microplastics. Now, one bottle cap floating in our oceans will generate over 1 million particles of microplastics as we're sailing around. So sampling for microplastics across the way was quite interesting because I wanted to know how far was the contamination levels of our oceans. The fact I found plastic in every sample is actually incredibly heartbreaking. Out of that, when we scaled everything up to the volume of water in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, we found that there was 58,000 particles of microplastics as an average across the whole surface of the ocean. The most amount of plastic I found was actually on my 5th sample day 5 at sea, just below Australia, and we found 368,000 particles of microplastics in that one location on the planet. I then sailed through an area in the middle of the Pacific Ocean called Point Nemo. And Point Nemo is the loneliest place on Earth. It's called the oceanic pole of inaccessibility. And it's basically where I am the most remote location on the planet. I ended up being closer to the astronauts in outer space at the International Space Station than I was to any human on any piece of land anywhere in the world. Do you want to have a guess at how much plastic I found there? Because for me, I was expecting to find almost no plastic in such a remote region of our oceans. And instead, I found an above average amount of microplastics at 68,000 particles of microplastics in that really remote, loneliest part of our world. Now, it sounds really scary, and it is devastating, but we all have the power to create action, and that's what this Climate Action Now campaign is all about. There's a number of things that you can do to support sustainability and to help the health of our oceans. Now, 64% of everything I found in the Southern Ocean was actually microfiber from the textile industry. So the synthetic fibers of the clothing that we wear. So imagine your sports gear, polyester, nylon, normally your leggings, things like that are generally built out of plastic. And what happens is as we do a daily load of laundry with synthetic fibers, we will release on average around 300 particles of microplastics into our waste distribution system. And what happens then is it goes through our filtration system, through our waste lines, it gets filtered, but they don't filter for microplastics because it's so small, and then all our discharge water in Australia is either pumped into creek beds and rivers or into the ocean itself. And so every load of laundry we do, we're inadvertently, accidentally contributing to the microplastics at sea. So if you want to take action, one thing you can do that's quite simple is have a chat to your family about installing a microplastic filter on the discharge line of your washing machine. Quick search online and there's dozens of different companies, different price ranges and products available, and that'll capture the plastic at your washing machine before it's sent to the waste distribution lines where it's impossible for us to filter it out of those systems. You can also do things like driving less. If you drive less, you're not just minimizing your CO2 emissions, but you're actually reducing the amount of microplastics entering our ocean. Now, car tires these days are no longer made of just rubber. They're made from a combination of rubber and plastic. So every time we drive our vehicles on the road, we're eroding microplastics off our car tires. That eventually makes its way to our storm drains, and all our storm drains feed to the ocean. They say that around 30% of all microplastics generated on Earth is from car tires. So doing simple things like walking where you can instead of driving makes a massive difference to the amount of microplastics we're generating. You can also do things like investing in really quality products. We have a very easy consumer lifestyle where we buy cheap things with the intention of throwing them away and disposing of them maybe within a year or two and replacing it with something else. But if we invested our money into a better quality product, we could repair it over replace it. It'll last a much longer period of time, and it'll minimize all of those waste streams that we don't actually see that are created from the manufacturing of that product. The other thing that I like to suggest is that when you do your grocery shop, an average shop, we are voting with our dollar. So every time we go to the store or we go and buy things online, we're choosing to create supply and demand for different types of products. So if we're starting to buy products that are more sustainable, that are less harmful for our environment, that are maybe paper packaged instead of plastic packaged, we're going to be creating more demand for those sustainable solutions over the chemically loaded, plastic packaged, very wasteful kind of items out there. And the same goes for things like fast fashion. If you invest in really quality clothing, you're going to have a lot less damage to our environment through those microplastics generated. So I hope you follow along with my next adventure. I'm currently planning to go non-stop solo and unassisted around the Arctic Circle in the Northern Hemisphere. Nobody has ever completed that trip, and I'm looking to become the first person in the world. Sadly, it's only possible because of the amount of ice that's melted up there due to climate change. But I hope to use that project as advocation and education for our communities. So go online to my website, lisablairsailstheworld.com. You can follow along with my adventures, but you can also share a post-it note to the campaign, and every new world record, I update the wrap on the hull of the vessel so your climate action message can be aboard Climate Action Now and be sailed across the world oceans. Thanks everybody.